Hello and welcome to Fly With Your Shadow, the podcast all about music, mental health and illness, and the mess that the COVID pandemic has made of it all. My name's Jeff Robson, and this show comes to you from my home in Winnipeg, Manitoba. This show came about out of a desire to talk about issues and topics that all too often aren't spoken about. The idea was to get people to talk about their struggles and the difficult events and issues that have gotten in their way. Whenever we face a difficult situation, one of the most important things that we can do to minimize the damage and make sure that we can understand the problem and not let it hold us back too long is to talk about it. But the more difficult the topic, the harder it is to talk about, and the more stigma and misunderstanding builds up around it, which only leads to more harm and keeps us from moving on past it. Lately, I've become really interested in the power of trauma in shaping people's lives. Today's show features a story of trauma that's honestly really difficult to hear. This might be the most intensely emotional episode of this show so far, and it's one that many listeners might find difficult or disturbing. It's a sad, unfortunate story about a young boy who was sexually abused by a Catholic priest and the devastating effects that it had on him and his family. If these topics might be difficult for you to hear about, or if you have a strong attachment to the Catholic Church, this might not be the episode for you. If you're willing and able to listen, I hope that you'll give us a try and come to understand this story. The story came to light in a powerful new song and video by a singer-songwriter duo that I've loved and admired for over a decade.
You were never gonna be on the hockey team. You were already high on the door. I can see you clear, your uniform. Sundays, oh, how did you go?
My name is Brenley MacEachern, and I am a singer-songwriter in a duo called Madison Violet. We've been working together for 22 years now, so we started just right out of the womb, I'd like to say. But yeah, so I'm a touring musician who has clearly not toured in, since pandemic.
Multi-instrumentalist singer and songwriter Lisa McIsaac and singer-songwriter Brenley MacEachern formed the duo Mad Violet somewhere near the turn of the millennium and released a few successful, acclaimed, award-winning recordings before being signed by powerful Canadian indie label True North Records and expanding their name to Madison Violet for the album No Fool for Trying, which was released in 2009. When I first heard that record, I was hooked immediately. It's one of those ones that I can actually still remember listening to for the first time, even though it was a dozen or so years ago. That album is probably their most acoustic and rootsy album, and it showed Lisa and Brenley's instrumental talents, their strong vocals and harmonies, and contained some incredibly strong songwriting. That album opened the duo up to even more attention and acclaim and award nominations. They released 2 studio albums and 1 live one on True North Records before moving on and releasing a few more albums since then. They're always in demand in Europe, and they spend much of their time touring that continent. Although long known and appreciated for powerful and personal lyrics, last month Madison Violet released a song that really blew me away. In an introduction to the song's video, which you can see at flywithyourshadow.com, Brenley says,
"This is a story about my brother Stevie, who was murdered in 2006 when he was 45 years old. At the age of 11, Stevie became an altar boy under the care of a priest named Father Alistair J. Olinsky. He survived a period of abuse that I know he never fully recovered from. This was a hard song to write, and it came with a lot of tears, but I know Stevie would want me to share his story. It's time to right the wrong."
The effect that the abuse had on Stevie led to his life unraveling and spiraling out of control, and eventually led to his murder. Although Stevie is the one who directly suffered through the abuse, his loving family members suffered a different kind of trauma, watching a beloved family member struggle so visibly. Rightly, Brenley is emotional telling his story. She also carries and conveys a lot of anger towards the perpetrator and an organization that seems rife with such stories. Again, I'll kind of warn you, this episode, especially the second half, may not be for everyone. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual assault, there are many mental health professionals that may be of help. There are links to many great organizations on the show's website at flywithyourshadow.com. With all that in mind, here's my talk with Brenley MacEachern, which was recorded on Canada's first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which gave many Canadians the opportunity to learn about a long covered-up history of similar abuse and damage done to Indigenous children in this country.
I'm no fool for trying. Don't know what you miss until it's gone. I'm no fool.
Now, before we get to the obvious elephant in the room of the past year and a half, Madison Violet, I'm here in Winnipeg. I don't think you guys have been to Winnipeg for quite some time. And so I'm just wondering if you can kind of catch people up, if anybody kind of hasn't seen you for a while, what you've been up to over the past few years.
Well, I'm trying to think. I guess the last time we played Winnipeg would have been the Winnipeg Folk Festival, which was, that's been some time. We tour a lot international. We've done several German, Switzerland, Scandinavian tours, the UK. We've done some, I was living in California for 3 years, so we started doing some West Coast California tours. And then, of course, on, Canada, East Coast, Ontario. So we've just been touring a lot. And then for the last year, I guess, back in April, Lisa and I both went to Berklee College of Music. We did some online courses studying basically how to engineer and record and produce our own material. So now we're producing our own record for the first time. This will be our 11th record, and we've always hired a producer, and this is the first time we're trying it ourselves and having more fun than I can possibly imagine. Like it's really, really lovely to have the skill set to be able to do it yourself, I have to say.
Yeah, there's a few things I want to ask there, but one thing that's always bugged me, why are there so few female producers? Like, why is it just one of those industries where it seems so dominated by men? Do you have any idea?
Yeah. Well, I think it's because I've talked to a lot of female producers, and it was really just having the confidence, because you kind of get boxed out. Like I can tell you I can't even tell you how many times we've, you go up on, you arrive at a club, let's say you're going to do your sound check, and, they kind of, like, a lot of the times guys will just sort of treat you like you don't even know what a DI is, or you don't know what it is, what this is, or whatever. So you just kind of bite your tongue a little, because you just don't want to go there. You don't want to get upset. You don't want to, but then there comes a time where you're just kind of like, you have to just say exactly what you need. And if they give you any business whatsoever, as soon as you know what you tell them what you're talking about, they kind of shut up and start listening for the most part. But a lot of guys will it's an oversight to think that a girl would know, it's amazing. Like, they really just don't, because there's not that many role models out there. So if you don't have the people, if you don't have, like, someone who's 50, 60, 70-year-old women who have been producing all their lives, well, you're not going to find them. They're far and few between. But now you'll see more, because now you're seeing, women and young girls making YouTube stars of themselves. Well, when you're doing YouTube, you're now learning how to do it at home on your own. So they're learning the software. So now we'll have role models, and I think that's going to change. It's just there's going to be a lot of time in between that it's going to take before that happens, before we see it happen.
Do you still experience that kind of sexism in the world, or are you mostly talking about when you guys started out?
It's not as common now, because I think there's a bigger conversation happening, and I think guys are listening to that, and they're just going, oh wow, yeah, you know what, I probably did that, and I didn't mean to do that, but I did, and now they see what's happening. And so it's definitely changing, and it's been quite some time since I felt like I've been confronted with sexism, to be honest, which is good. I'm glad that I can say that now.
So now, kind of having the education of a producer, how does that change your approach to making records now? Like, do you guys kind of see yourselves making different kinds of records or doing things differently now that you have those skills to do it yourself?
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to explain to a producer or to a musician who's playing on your record what you're hearing, because you can just do it yourself. Um, and then if it's I'm not like a lead guitar player, and if I need a certain kind of skill set in a guitar player, or we need a bass player, now we have all the confidence to just say, well, this is what we're looking for. And if they send it back and it's not quite right, I feel okay just saying, listen, it sounds lovely, but it's not what I was thinking. Can you try this? And the people we work with, the guys we work with or women we work with, are more than happy to just go, no, this is your record. So I'm happy to try that. And in the end, everyone always seems to be thinking, like, in the end, it's like, yeah, actually, that's great. I would never have thought to do that. And then other times you send it out and you don't, with no instruction whatsoever, and it comes back exactly what you wanted, because that's why you sent it to that specific musician, because that's their style and you're looking for that style. So I guess being at the helm and just knowing that that's what producers do. So now we're just putting on that hat and going, well, we've been making records for 20 years, where it's like you're auditing the class. And now we have the fundamentals of the software. We use Ableton Live, and we know the software well. And so now we can do, we know that we don't want to mix our own record or master. We'll get the people who, that's where they spend all their time. So I think it would be foolish for us to think that we could mix our own stuff at this point. We don't have that skill set yet,
Is there a danger though in doing too much yourself, or not having kind of that outside perspective of a producer? Do you think there's some inherent kind of concern about not getting the kind of feedback that sometimes a producer can provide, or that objectivity?
Well, luckily, I think, yes, I suppose there is a danger. And I think the way we are handling that is, we have, like, John Reynolds, who produced our first two records in the UK. He's kind of my mentor at the moment. So when I'll send him mixes, like my rough mixes, and say, like, what do you think? And then he might make a comment, or he might just go like, wow, these songs are fabulous. And he'll lead me down. He's been very, very helpful. And then my friend Sarah McDougall, who's a producer, and Hill Kokortis, who produced our last record, they're both amazing. Like, I can always reach out to them and ask them for advice on certain things. But when it comes down to actually the song itself and the instrumentation, I don't know. I think that we have done 10 records with very little input other than writing the song and doing the whole structure and everything and arrangement. We have very little input in what goes on it. Like, we will say yes or no, but we're letting them produce it. So now we're just allowing ourselves to produce it. So if it comes out in the records like, oh, you guys went very wrong, well, that's okay. It's okay. The biggest mistakes I've made are the ones that I've learned the most from. So that's okay with me.
And have you started this process of making an album yourselves now? Like, is this already underway, or is this still in the planning stages?
We started in June. So we've been recording for, June, July, August, September, 4 months solid. And it'll be done by the end of probably next month. And it's been going really well. And we didn't, Lisa and I, for the first 10 years of our relationship, we're a couple. And then for the last 11 years, we have not been a couple, but we've still been in, work together professionally. And, we've always continued this relationship because when we hit the stage, it's magical for us. We get along so well. We trust each other. We compel one another to challenge ourselves. And so that's been great. But, sometimes off stage or at rehearsals or whatever, we can really get at each other and we don't always agree. And it can get pretty foul sometimes. It's been quite a long time since we've had a big fight. And during this entire process, it's gone so smoothly. We're giving each other a lot of space to do what we do best. And we're relying on each other's talents and the same, and also challenging one another. It's just been so good.
That's amazing. And, I'm obviously not as emotionally mature as you are, because I can't imagine what would be more difficult, working with my partner every day or working with my ex every day. So the fact that you were still able to make such great music and be such great friends, so many years after, that obviously speaks to the magic that comes when you two play together, because you're such talented musicians on your own. You could go off and do your own thing probably, right? And I'm sure it would be great, but what keeps you coming back to you and Lisa being Madison Violet?
I think we are both Libra. We're both born on a Wednesday at noon. And I think we've found sort of a balance in one another. So when one person is really out of balance, out of focus, the other comes rushing in to make everything even keel again, it feels like. And I think, I would love to do my own record, and I'm sure Lisa would do her own record. I think now that we know how to record ourselves and produce ourselves, I think that we'll both have a solo record in the future. But when it comes to touring and whatnot, I think we'll just always keep making records together and touring together, because it's kind of fun to go down a road with someone else and not always alone, yeah. So it's kind of like you share in the trouble and you share in the good things, and it's a little easier on the heart. I don't know. I'm not sure. I've always been a team player. Like, even as we were both very athletic as kids, played a lot of sports, and it was always team sports. Like, even if we played tennis, it would be doubles, so I think it's just kind of in us to need that sort of solidarity in somebody else. I don't know. I don't know if that's a weakness or we just get along well together and like having company. I don't know.
And after 20 years together, you must feel a bit of a sense of a legacy. Like, when you look back on those 20 years, you guys have had so much success and won awards and been to so many places. You must be real proud of what you've accomplished together.
I am. You always have these dreams of, traveling all over the world in the big tour buses. And we have toured in other people's tour buses, but we certainly have not gotten to a place where we're, would we want, if someone said to you, what would be the level of success that would make you, feel like you've really, I don't know, I don't even want to say made it, but would it be nice to be selling out some soft theaters and so that it's a little more sustainable for your future? Yes, absolutely. Yes. And you're reaching more people. And so when we just played a festival on the weekend in Huntsville at an outdoor nursery. And it was so fun. Like, it was so fun to get, like, haven't played a show in almost 2 years, and to hear that applause was so nice. And these were like diehard fans that came to this show. These were our fans, it was a free show, but these were our fans that came. And because we asked, we were like, how many people have seen us before? And like 75% of the people put their hands up, and that's so lovely. And there's, you think about it and you're like, wow, how can I take this group of people and times that by about 10, and we never done, like, listen, we've never done this for the money. I mean, would it be a silly choice in career to do it for the money? Because we've done it this long, it sure would be nice to start building a nest egg. That's all I'm saying,
Isn't it getting harder and harder to do that though in the world where selling records isn't really a thing anymore and streaming royalties are so terrible? Is it getting more uncertain and harder to keep going?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know if it's harder to keep going because we don't know what else to do. So we keep on doing it. I think that I would love to get into producing other singer-songwriters, predominantly female, and hopefully more in the BIPOC community as well. I really want to, the more I learn, the more I want to help other people. I'm still not going to do it for the money. But I still want to be involved. If I'm not touring for the rest of my life, I want to be involved with musicians and in some way. Maybe I'll be on or maybe Lisa, one of us will be on doing a play or something. Who knows? Like a musical. And I don't know. I never know what's in store. And one thing that I learned a lot, well, a couple of years ago, just before pandemic, I read A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, and it kind of changed me. And I don't really spend that much time thinking about tomorrow. And I'm really happy that I've developed that skill, because thinking about what could go wrong is, you're just worrying about it twice. It's the way I have it. So when you ask me, like, do you think it's getting harder? Well, it is getting harder, but I'm not going to let it knock me down.
Talk to me a bit about the past couple of years in particular. Your last record, Everything's Shifting, right? Came out in 2019, I believe. I don't remember what time of year, like how much time did you have with that record before everything ground to a halt?
I'm trying to think. Not that much time. I think, I'm trying to think of when it came out. I'm going to say May or June of 2019, but I could be wrong. We had some time. We had a couple of tours, but not a ton of time, I guess. But again, like, you need a new record to tour, and yet records aren't what's selling. It's kind of an interesting, now it's about singles. We'll now it'll just be one song at a time and then the record kind of thing.
That album though seemed to get a lot of great reaction. You of course won some awards, and it seemed to do pretty well. So is there a frustration or a sadness when you get this thing that you're so proud of, and then all of a sudden you can't go and work it for as long and as well as you would have liked?
I don't even know if it was a thought I had, to be honest. I just I was going through a breakup right at the beginning of pandemic, and into a new relationship, and I think that kind of took over my entire world. I went through a divorce, and Lisa shortly after went through an 11-year breakup as well, a breakup after 11 years. So I think the last thing that was on our mind was actually the record. Yeah, it comes down to, like, your own personal nightmare, and I've been pretty good at separating myself from my job. I don't identify as Brenley MacEachern and Madison Violet. I just identify as just me as a person in this world, I guess. So I don't know. I just didn't get caught up in the, oh no, poor me, we can't tour this record. I just took it as it came. We were in Saskatchewan when, in the middle of a tour of Saskatchewan, we were in Saskatoon, and called a friend. They said, hey, listen, I think they might be closing the borders because of this virus thing. You might want to get home. So we like showed up at Air Canada like immediately, and they just put us on the next flight. We went home, and I went to stay with my new partner on a farm and never left. So yeah, so I haven't thought much about it except for now with this new record. Yeah, okay, I'm starting to think about like, okay, really, I hope that we have a way to tour this new record next year, you know. But I have to catch myself because I know that getting it, you shouldn't have attachments, because when you have attachments on the future, it's not a good idea.
What was that like all of a sudden, because you've spent so much of your life and obviously made so much of your income on the road, to suddenly not be able to do that? How do you kind of shift personally and financially to not having shows to do?
Well, luckily for me personally, I had bought a house, like a loft in Toronto, and I sold it to my ex. And so the housing market in Toronto was very good. So I got a healthy return. And so I kind of have my nest egg again. And I bought an Airstream, a 1972 Airstream. I got my brother to come with me to pick it up in his nice truck. We pulled it back to the farm. I have it parked right beside the house where I'm living, and I built a studio in it, and it's been the most incredible. I've never had my own space to create in, and it's like 20 steps from the house. It's got air conditioning. It has heaters, and I love it. I'm in love with it, honestly. I spend so much time in it, and so I didn't spend too much time crying about not being on the road because I was so happy in my new space.
Did the creativity just keep going just because you had this space and you had the time now, or was it hard to find the creativity? A lot of people I talked to had a hard time being creative for a while.
Well, I wasn't writing much, for sure. For the first bit, I actually, that's not true. At first, I was writing quite a bit, and then for some reason, I stopped and never recorded any of those songs. I had little audio memos of them, and then this Berkeley course came up, and I thought, okay, you know what, we have to start thinking about a new record. We can't be off the road for this long and not have something to show for it. Plus, our manager is going to kill us. So, and our agent and all the team members that we work with. You need to have a product or nobody cares. So we did this course. It was 3 months. It was amazing. And, we started working on the record, and I remember the conversation. Lisa said, we don't have many songs. And I said, you know what? Every single record we've ever made, we have all the songs finished, the structure, all the lyrics written, everything. We go into the studio, and then we lay it down. We get the rhythm section down, and then we bring in the players, and boom, we mix it, we master it, it's out. No chance to sit with these songs and see where are the weak links in the song, because there's going to be. So I told Lisa, I said, listen, because we can produce this ourselves, and because we have now own our own studio, like I own my own studio, you have a studio space at your house now, we can do this and take as much time as we want. The lyrics don't need to be done. Nothing needs to be done. We just have to start with the sketches and see how they build. And that's why it's been so fun, and I've been more creative than I ever have in my entire life, because I've been given this gift of time and to not have to have it finished. And I think it's probably like, I'm sure the Beatles didn't just like, John Lennon just sit down and write a song and then they go in and record it. No, they probably played it many times, and like they spent all that time in Hamburg. They were probably playing these songs over and over and over and changing them. I haven't seen a lot of the Beatles, all the films they've made. I should. one of the things I should have done on this on pandemic, and looks like I still have time.
As a fan, what do you think? Am I going to notice a difference either in the sound or the content of this record? Do you think once you get done with it?
Gee, I don't know. I mean, there are some songs that are more sort of stripped back. I know our fans really love to hear the more stripped back acoustic stuff. And there's definitely, because I just sent a song to John Reynolds to mix it, and it's really just both of our voices, guitar, banjo, and fiddle, because that's all the song really needed. But there's some other songs that are, pretty full on production. And I would say that it's a combination of the music that we grew up on, like the stuff that I listened to. I listened to a lot of, like when I was in my first year of college, I was into Cat Stevens and, well, Neil Young. I've known, he was my hero since I was like 11. But, I got into a lot of Cat Stevens, and then all of a sudden I moved to another town and I got right into the Britpop. Like I got into the Stone Roses and the Cure and the Smiths and, all that synthy stuff it's still in there. There's some amazing songwriting back there, and sonically I loved it. And so there's some sort of modern twists on that. I'm really into kind of lo-fi indie. I like when I'm just like working on the tracks but not listening, but I'm just kind of organizing, I'll be listening to like lo-fi study tracks, like beats. And so sometimes there's that kind of feel underneath it. Like I'm right into Oliver Arnold's right now, and I know his vibe is going to make it onto this record because it's what I'm listening to. So I will pay homage to him, you know. But I think, we have a sound, I think, that's created just by the two big instruments, which is both of our voices that blend together. So, but one thing I'm really excited about the songwriting on this record. That's one thing. I think these are some of the best songs we've ever written.
Why do you say that though? Because when I think of the songs that you've written over the past however many records it's been, I mean, I came on board like a lot of people, I guess, with No Fool for Trying, and there's some amazing songs on there, and the records that have come since then. So what do you feel like it makes these ones better than some of those songs that I love from those records?
I think it's a good question, and I've been asking myself it too, because I'm like, why am I so like I can't sleep at night right now because the songs are just going through my head constantly. And maybe that happened on every record. I don't know. I should write that down. I should, but it always feels like a new experience for me. But I really can't get it out of my. It's driving me bonkers, honestly. And well, I think, my niece was killed in a car accident 5 years ago, and it's taken me 5 years to write. I tried writing. I've written numerous songs, and I couldn't sing any of them. I sang one of them once in a show in Germany, and I had written songs about my brother Stevie in the past. Both Lisa and I have written songs about my brother Stevie, and when we sang those songs, there was an energy in the room that was incredibly supportive, and it was sad, but it was really like people really embraced it. I could tell. So it was like, okay, I'm wearing my heart on my sleeve, and also these fans who are listening are happy to hear it and can find themselves in it, and that's a job well done, in my opinion. And then when I sang this song for my niece, I'd sang it the one time, and I could just feel like the audience, it was like, no, that song doesn't tell us, it's too obscure. It's not telling us where your heart is. That's kind of what I felt. And I never sang it again. And but now I'm at a place where I can find those, I can see it now, and I can say exactly what I wanted to say to her or to my sister who lost her. And so I think maybe that's why I think the songwriting's good. No Fool for Trying, I think, was our best record, and I think it's because it was our real healing record. We tried, and I think this is a record where we're healing again. Lisa's breakup is on this record. It's, and that trauma of she, I think, yeah, maybe that's it. We're just being really out there with what really happened, and but telling it in a way that doesn't make people cringe, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
But I mean, your songs have always had that way of kind of reaching into people's hearts. I'm sure that you've heard hundreds of stories from people over the years from some of your songs that, you obviously write from a place of personal emotion and personal experience. I would assume with a lot of these songs, but obviously they're touching a lot of other people as well. So when you write them, I mean, are you writing them mostly for yourself? Is that your therapy, or are you thinking of, kind of reaching people's hearts with those songs at the same time?
I think it's both. I think, like, I don't want, and I think that's where I learned about that song that I wrote for Annalise that I sang. And I like, wow, this song was really for me. And this was really, really obscure. And it didn't reach people because they couldn't find they couldn't find the loss in it, because I was too, I don't even know if obscure is the right word, but I didn't give them any pain in it, if that makes sense. And other songs were just like me, kind of like this song, Time to Right the Wrong, about my brother.
It's gone on too long. It's time to right the wrong. And I can just imagine how your life was unraveling.
That came out I'm sure that took no longer than an hour, and I felt like I didn't even write it. Like, Lisa was like writing down stuff that I was saying, and then we picked up the guitars, and then we just started. It just came out, and it's exactly how, this is a true story of kind of how it happened. One sort of blip.
Well, I mean, obviously that song's a big part of the reason why I wanted to talk to you today. It's an amazing story. Can you give me a bit of context though about how big is your family? How many siblings do you have? And like, were you guys super close when you were growing up?
Yeah, so my parents met in Montreal. My mom was hitchhiking, and my dad's a Cape Bretoner. When my mom was born in England and then grew up in Montreal when she moved there, and she was like 4. My dad had a job in Montreal. They met, and then he got a job at Ontario Hydro in Kincardine. And so after having 4 kids, piled us all in the car and we moved to Kincardine. My brother Stevie was probably 10 at the time, and I was 4 at the time. And I have another sister, Kate, who's 11 months younger than my oldest brother, Stevie. And then Kenny, who's 3 years older than me. And we started going to church because my dad was a Catholic, and they moved to this tiny little town and knew zero, like nobody. And so my mom decided she would convert to Catholicism, which meant all 4 of us kids had to go to catechism classes. And the priest there, Father Olinsky, he, was talking to my parents and asked if Stevie could be an altar boy. And eventually Kenny, and my other brother, was an altar boy as well. And the priest, it's so textbook, like he used to come to our house and with candies and totally ingratiate himself with my parents and just tell them how special a boy Stevie was. And he bought him a 1970 CT70 Honda motorcycle. He took him to Florida, and when my parents would inquire, he would say, oh, well, I don't have any kids of my own. And, you know, Stevie seemed such like a lonely kid. And then, you know, then when my parents did suspect something was up when they asked him, he denied it completely. Stevie denied it because, of course, by that time it's too late. You know, they've already got the kid under their wing saying you can't tell anyone, or, you know, we don't know exactly. He finally admitted it to my mom and dad when he was around 17. But his life was already destroyed. He was already, you know, selling drugs, and he ran away from home when he was 15. It was just, yeah, he just always, from then on, it was a struggle. And until the day he died, and then he was murdered in Toronto in 2006.
Talking about is important, right? Like, why did you decide that now was time to right the wrong, and it was time to tell this story in this way?
You know, I remember when the movie Spotlight, did you ever see the movie Spotlight?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was in, I think, 2016. I think that movie came out. And which was the year my niece Annalise was killed. And I've always like wanted to tell the truth, but I always thought, well, you know, my parents are getting up there. Do I really want to tell that? Do I really want to, you know, expose our family and what they went through, and my parents feeling, of course, because they would blame themselves. I didn't want any of that. And then I wrote some songs, and my parents I wrote the Time to Right, well, we wrote Time to Right the Wrong, and we played it, and they never really said much about it. Like they weren't against it, you know, they didn't feel like, they were like, well, it's true, and I know you have to say it. And as a matter of fact, I did an interview yesterday with my hometown paper, and the woman was so kind. She said, listen, this is in your hometown. Do you want to ask your parents first how they feel about having this story told in there, and then have to walk down the streets? And I said, you know, it is bothering me, so I will phone them. And I phoned them this morning, and they just, you know, they're the best parents in the world. They said, listen, if you need to do this, then you do this. But if it was up to us, because it's our town, we would rather not. But you have to do what you have to do. And that was my answer. So I'm pulling the story in my town, because it doesn't need to go there, you know, like, but the story does need to be told, because, you know, even it's like just watching the residential schools and what happened there. Like when that came up, like that was just, I just was, you know, so heartbroken to see like how many, like thousands and thousands of children have gone through this and are still going through it now. And so it took me a while, because I just didn't want to tell the story while my parents were still living. And then I'm like, well, that my parents might live till they're 100. I might die before my parents. I can't sit here with this and eating me up inside. And also, you know, people, I'm not like going out. I wasn't going after the church. I just want the truth. Like, I just want people to start telling the truth. But if it means going after the church, then I will do that too, because we have to, you know, all these allegations, they just kept getting swept under the table. This priest that was the one we went to, Father Olinsky, he moved from parish to parish to parish. He was moved all over. I finally got his obituary, and he must have worked at 12 different parishes, and he died when he was 61 years old. So, you know, and then that means that the Hamilton diocese, they knew about it, right? They had to have. So they need to be held accountable for covering it up.
Can you talk at all about the cost, like on your, like what was he like before this happened, and sort of how did it lead to his kind of spiral down? Like, what was the process like of kind of losing him, I guess?
Well, he didn't want to, my dad told me he remembers when we went back to Montreal for a visit, a year after or whatever, we were in Kincardine, and he ran away, and he said my dad had to like run across these fields after him to get him back in the car. And I remember him thinking like, man, because it was probably already happening, but he couldn't tell his parents. So he was he just was always into trouble. He had bad skin. He had terrible, terrible acne as a kid. And so that kind of, made him he got bullied. He fell one time and he smashed his front teeth and broke his teeth. So his teeth were broken, and until my parents could afford to get them fixed, he had to live like that for a while, and that couldn't have been easy on him. He was a great brother to me. Like, he always, if my other siblings if we were fighting, he would always be the one to run to my rescue. He was lovely. He, but he just, trouble found him everywhere, and he got into the worst, the crack cocaine, and he spent one time he stole a car from in Kincardine. He drove it to Orangeville and to a Tim Hortons and sat there for the cops just to come get him, because he didn't know where he was going or what he was doing. He just needed to get out of Kincardine, and so he went to like detention centers for that. I think he was in Walkerton, and he spent time in Brampton because he ended up going on a joyride one time with some other guys, and he was driving and they stole this van, and then he got thrown in jail for having stolen something under 5,000, whatever the charge is for under a certain amount of money. So he was in a big detention center for that, and I loaned him my guitar. I had a 12-string guitar that my parents had bought for my graduation present when I was 17. So I loaned it to him because I had another guitar. And I went to see him inside in the jail, and he learned how to play a couple of Rolling Stones songs. Like, he'd never played guitar in his life, and he just taught himself to play. I think I might have given him a couple of books as well, and I thought that was amazing. And he was super smart. He went back to George Brown College when he was in his 30s, and he graduated at the top of his class as an IT specialist. And he worked in some fabric shops as that. He worked at he worked as a waiter, or sorry, not a waiter, a bartender at big fancy hotel in Toronto. He kind of, he hung around with a little bit of like professors at U of T. Like, he was kind of hung around with a little bit of the upper echelon, a bit, because that's his vocabulary. Was very articulate, but I'm pretty sure, well, he told me, so I know for a fact, he basically was on crack and still going to school and finished top of his class. So he had the addiction. He had the addiction that could never break, because I think the demons and the shame that he carried around with him was just so dark.
And is he the kind of guy who was able to talk about his feelings and talk about what had happened? Like, was he aware of the impact of what had happened to him at that church, or?
Not really. I wanted, it's my regret is not asking him more about it. I couldn't at the time. I think I couldn't sit in my own discomfort to ask him about it. It wasn't just the priest. Like, he ended up kind of prostituting himself a bit, I guess, because he always ended up with older men, and I think that's where he knew he could survive. So he was still ashamed. I know that he met this guy Robert when he was like, I think he was 17 or 18. I have a letter from him that he sent to me from India because he was a drug mule. He was brought to India, the British Virgin Islands. He would send us these beautifully written letters, and he wrote one to me, one to my brother Stevie, and one to my sister Kate, and one to my mom. And I remember he sent her like this beautiful tablecloth from India, and but he was essentially a drug mule, like, you know, and yeah, like what a story he's got. Yeah.
And I mean, what effect does this have on you watching this, somebody you love struggling so much?
Oh, it was like, he came to live with me one time for a couple of months, and my ex was just at one point just like, you know what, he's got it. I can't do this anymore. Because, he would drink and come home at all hours of the night. Like it just wasn't working out. And so I took him to countless detox centers. He went to a number of different houses where you know, journal and learn to try and like give up, like basically where addicts go after they've been detoxed. And but it just never worked. It would work for a while, and I didn't. It was hard, because knowing what I know now and how I've changed as a person, I would have, and I've just grown into being more compassionate and now I, know how wish I'd had more empathy, I guess, back then. I always went when he called me and he needed me. Never once did I ever say no, so I'm thankful for that. But I know now, like, I wish I would have tried in different ways. I wish I could have reached him, but I don't know that anybody else can heal anybody else. I think you have to heal from the inside, you know?
Hopefully you don't feel, too much responsibility for any of this. Obviously none of it's certainly your fault, right? Like, and none of it's, you're kind of a victim of the same horrors that he went through in a way, because it's affected you as well. So you can't really expect that you could have done anything to fix it. So
No, the only thing I could have done is I can remember this conversation, and I play it over and over in my head. And I remember him saying to me something along the lines of like, don't you think everyone's bisexual? And I was sort of coming out myself, but not ready to come out. But I had started seeing this woman, and I wasn't ready to, be out, and I wasn't going to tell him yet. And so I know my reaction to that was like, dude, I don't know. And kind of just like, I'm not comfortable talking about this right now, Eventually I did get a chance to tell him that I was with Lisa, and I remember him like being just so astonished, like, wow. And but he was great. And but he had this girlfriend Debbie for 100 years, like not 100 years, but for like 17 years. But even with Debbie, he was still lost, like so I don't know. I don't even know if he was, what, if he knew what. I think he was very confused with his own sexuality, to be honest.
when you heard that he'd passed away, was it a surprise? Was it a bit of a relief in some way that he was finally at peace from the demons, or did you just feel like, I wish we could have turned this around?
Well, it was absolutely shocking. I always thought that if we got the call, I thought that I would be prepared. But my preparation would always be for he's OD'd, never that he was murdered, never that he was strangled to death. So that was just shocking, like what has happened, like, and that guy, it's not the first time, this guy Norman English, it's not the first time that he assaulted someone. So he says that my brother tried to steal his wallet, and that seems really not. My brother would be more the kind of person that would walk into a Walmart and walk out with a television without paying for it, just so that he could get a hit, okay? But to steal something from someone, definitely not him at all. Like, no way. So, but I don't know, I wasn't there, but regardless, there were people who watched that said that there were people watching him. Stevie was unresponsive and he was still strangling him. So, and the guy got off with 18 months probation. He was charged with second-degree murder, and then it was reduced to something, assault, causing bodily harm. That's it. Yeah. And I was going to go to the trial. And luckily, when I was on tour in Australia, and there was this wonderful person sitting in the front. And after the show, he came up to me and he said, I'd love to, he goes, I just want to ask you, like, how's your mom? And he's like, wow, that's the first time anyone's ever really asked me how my mom is. And it was just kind of an interesting question to ask first. And then we got to talking and we sat down and had a drink together. And he told me, he said, I know this is going to sound strange because I've just met you and you don't know me at all. And I don't know you. He said, but something tells me that you should not go to this trial. He goes, I feel like you will try and save this person. Like, you will try and forgive them and try and then help them through it. And that's not for you to do. That's not your job here. And he was right. I probably would have exactly done that. The little Mother Teresa in me, that would probably have just been brought to the surface. And, I would have thought, like, me forgiving him as part of this process or whatever. And I didn't need to go and see him and meet him to be able to let it go, to forgive him, because I do forgive him, because there's no sense in hanging on to it, but yeah, so to answer your question, it took me a long time. I remember my mom's sister saying to her right after he was killed, like, well, at least you know where he is now. And my mom was just so angry at that, because it's, she's happy to hear that now, but it's taken 15 years to go, well, I know where he is now, because sometimes we wouldn't hear from him for a year. We wouldn't know where he is, so yeah, from the ages of 15 to 45, that's 30 years of just struggle after struggle after struggle, and every addiction you can think of.
What can we do? Like, can we right the wrong, as you say? Like what's the good that can come out of this, or what can we do as a result of this?
Honestly, I think you start with the people who continue to go to church, because even though they know that it happens, they continue to go to church. They're, to me, are almost the worst kind, because they're just turning a blind eye. And if they don't go to church, then the number of people going to church it'll just keep dropping and dropping and dropping, whereas the church won't be getting all the money that goes into the collection baskets. So then it forces the clergy, the leaders, to start turning in these priests and stop the corruption, this systemic, issue. It's right at the root of it. And it's, the secrecy is incredible. So if you don't go to church and you don't support that organization, then they'll have to start telling the truth, so that you clean it up. You clean up the churches, and then people can return to going back to the place where they want to worship, knowing that this isn't going on anymore, because they've stopped it, because no one will sit by and watch people, just priests getting shuffled around again. And it also needs to be centralized. Like, you need to have like a one place that's like, okay, we're going to centralize this, we're going to work together to bring all of the cases together, whether the priests are dead or not, doesn't matter. We need to bring it. If someone said something, it's probably true. Why would you want to say something about a priest, that wasn't the truth? What's so I think you gotta someone, and I want to be a part of it. Like, I think that's, I found sort of my where I want to be an activist. I want to keep this conversation going, and I think the statute of limitations needs to change. I don't think there should be any time, if it's 30 years and it takes a victim to take 30 years to tell their story, so be it. We don't know what it takes for us to change, and if it's courage or if it's just the last resort. I don't know what it is that it takes for people to talk about their abuse, but eventually they will. I've been getting so many emails and private messages from people who, yeah, it's been amazing and heavy,
So is it going to be hard singing this song for the rest of your life, or is there a certain amount of empowerment in telling it the way you have and stuff like that? Or
it's hard, but it's more empowering. It's more like I'm just talking the truth right now, so no fear, just keep going. Like, yeah. So I don't know. I really just hope that, because I know that people get really uncomfortable, the Catholics sitting out there, they don't like to hear it, but unfortunately the church can't police this themselves anymore. They're not policing it. There's pedophilia in the church. They gotta, the grand juries need to get involved now.
wow, it's an amazing song and an amazing story, and it must not be easy telling it, but I sure do appreciate you taking the time and sharing it with us today.
Well, thank you for wanting to do a story on it, or like to do a podcast on it, because I think that it's not everybody wants to hear this stuff. Like, it's funny, I'm reading this book right now called The Great Alone, and it starts out, because I would like to write a book about my brother. It's been on my, I write a lot. I've written tons. I just have not put it into book form yet, but it is definitely, something that I strive to do in the future. But I'm reading this book, and it starts out just so happy, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the kind of story I want to read. I want to, I don't want to tell a story about my brother. It's too unhappy. Like, this is what I want to read. And just like, as I turn the next page, everything just turns to, it goes from beautiful gold to just rust. Like, it's so heartbreaking, and you name it, it goes wrong. And yet I'm still, I'm 2 chapters left, and it's got me so, I think about it every night. It's actually taken the place of the songs that have been running through my head.
The new obsession.
The new obsession, exactly. So yeah, it's not easy for people to want to hear this stuff, but I think it's essential at this point. If we want to,
yeah, it's so important.
It really is. Like, this is Truth and Reconciliation Day. Nobody, it's kind of you. Oh no, there's going to be another grave. This. You know what, people? Let's just force change. the Indian Act, let's go back to it and start fresh. And everybody should learn exactly how corrupt the government of Canada was and still is by not making changes fast enough.
The priest made sure there was gas in the car. He knew he'd have to run like the devil. He stole the last offering, drank from the cup. He promised you a place up in heaven.
Brenley and Lisa continue to work away on a new Madison Violet album, which will likely be released early in 2022. They've started doing some shows post-pandemic, but recently had to postpone a European tour until next year. As always, I hope that you'll support these musicians and help them continue to do what they love most by buying some music or merchandise as directly as possible. At MadisonViolet.com, you can find CDs, t-shirts, handwritten lyrics, and even some gorgeous hats made by Brenley's mother, Valerie. You can find out more about the music used in this episode and find other episodes, and you can join the mailing list at flywithyourshadow.com. I always really love hearing from listeners. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email me at flywithyourshadow@gmail.com. The show is always ad-free. It costs you absolutely nothing. If you want to support the show, and I hope that you might, please share the episode with someone who might enjoy it. Your help spreading the word would be greatly appreciated. My name's Jeff Robson. I really thank you for listening. I hope you got something out of this show, and I hope you'll join me again on the next episode of Fly With Your Shadow.